Okay, great. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We are talking about member engagement with online advocacy communities, or as I know a lot of you call them, legislative action centers. We're going to be sharing some best practices as well as give you with some actual hard examples of how you might be able to do this yourself. So, Andy, are you on the line with us? I believe you are.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, so I'm joined today by Andy. Andy, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and Higher Logic.
Sure, yeah. Hi, everybody. This is Andy Steggles. Carol, by the way, I don't know if you know how to switch off that beeping, but hopefully everybody else isn't hearing it. We can switch it off. That'd be great.
I can do that.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Andy Steggles. I'm the president and I guess more importantly, the chief customer officer for Higher Logic. Higher Logic, if you don't know, is a community platform provider. And, of course, one core element of community is advocacy. We work with over 600 organizations, most of which are associations of one sort or another, trade or professional society, both for-profit and non-profit. And those 600 or so associations have a total of about 250,000 communities that represent about 30 million people that are touched on a regular basis, usually by discussing and collaborating over different things. That's kind of what we do. Carol, over to you.
Okay, great. So I have tried to make that chime go off. Hopefully that has worked. And I am actually an inbound sales and marketing strategist and practitioner. I have worked with both for-profit and nonprofit organizations, helping them to engage their members, their customers online. I really have a special place in my heart, too, for associations because I really do truly believe that they make the world a better place. And so using a lot of the strategies and tactics and techniques that I find in the for-profit world, I like being able to carry that over to the nonprofit world as well. I also work with Fotility as their sales and marketing director, and over the last few years of working with them have become a almost accidental expert on all things grassroots advocacy online and so forth. So we're really excited to be able to share this with everyone today as well. So a few agenda items, just some housekeeping things. We are planning on just running this for 30 minutes today. Understanding that if you do have some questions and we go over a little bit, that's fine if you want to hang out for a little bit afterwards, but we really want people to be able to enjoy the rest of their afternoons and have some key takeaways and actionable items they can take with them. We are going to be recording this. We are going to be sharing the slides afterwards. We are going to be sending you a follow-up email with additional resources with all of those links. And so there you have that. We're first going to be talking about how to create a grassroots advocacy strategy, how to use a legislative action center or online community for that, some of the best practices around implementing that strategy, and really how do you get your members to join your legislative action center. We're going to have a live example, as I mentioned, and then we're going to be taking your questions and giving you some additional resources and next steps. So let's just dive right into it. Andy, and I don't know if you recall, but I do remember, I think the first time that Andy and I actually met was at a conference, and we got into a conversation about inbound, and then we got into a conversation about engagement, and then we got into a conversation about associations and what is it that their members really want to engage with them on. And I came across an interesting study from the M&R Benchmarks reports last year that showed of all of the different types of engagement that associations can do with their members, advocacy has the highest click-through rates, the highest response rates, the highest page completion rates of any other activity that they do. I also found some interesting research that surveyed people in general, and I forget the exact number, but they had come away with the conclusion that, in general, individual people, they trust their associations to deliver the right amount of content about different advocacy issues more than they do their own congressman or legislator. So I think that's a really powerful way to understand that people do want to engage in advocacy and be educated. They want to do that online, and that they trust their associations to be able to help them with that. So how do we start with what does an advocacy strategy need to look like? And I put advocacy in parentheses because there's also a strategy for creating a community around that online, and Andy's going to share some of his best practices and tips for that. But a lot of the steps that you do in creating your advocacy strategy is understanding how you're going to communicate with people and how you're going to get people to communicate with each other. So diving right into that. And you can talk a little bit, too, about the goals of the community that's going to have itself. But as an advocacy strategy, one of the first things you want to consider is how does it align with your mission and your business goals? How is it impacting your members, and why are these issues important to them? Who are those members? What's the audience? And how does that impact their goals, whether they're business owners or if they're tradespeople in different organizations, or if you're an advocacy group and your advocacy group is targeting parents? What are their particular goals, and how would your goals align with that in helping them? Do you, for example, want to impact legislation so that you want to increase funding for a particular program or pass a bill or act to give more rights to your particular individuals or repeal something? Or are you an organization that you only want to educate, understand what the member sentiment is, not necessarily take a stance, but give them a place to start talking about that and let that drive your particular initiative? Is that your advocacy strategy aimed to inform and shape opinion on pending or proposed legislation that might be coming up so that it's something that you want to see happen, but it needs to happen in a certain way? Or are you trying to build a list of supporters for some type of future action? All of these are good ideas and goals to have in how you're going to use advocacy in your organization, and also then corresponding to how you're going to engage with them. Andy, how are we doing?
Yeah, good. I was just waiting for you to finish that, so I was going to offer a couple of insights. So one of the things that Carol and I were talking about when we started getting into this was how community, the team of people within the organization that are focused around advocacy are essentially another community. The members that are interested in advocacy, which we want to get engaged and we want to get lobbying and whatnot for the position to support this position statement of the organization. Well, again, that's just a community of people, and so the question is, how can we get them involved as part of the advocacy initiative? And when we started talking to different trade organizations about this, it was clear that for many of them, there was one important piece missing in their current process, and it was mainly because they didn't have the ability to do this. And so as an example, when an issue comes up, many organizations, a traditional process is, all right, an issue comes up and it goes to the advocacy committee. The committee looks at it, drafts a position statement that they think supports the view of the organization, that then gets ratified by the board or some other governing body, and then finally it's put out to the membership to get them to support it in one way or another. But the piece that was very obviously missing from that is the part where the committee that creates a position statement, they may not have been taking into account the broader views of the organization. And so that's where, one of the areas in which community can play a pretty active role within this as a legislative support center. And so for example, and it can be done in many different ways, but the one that tends to resonate the best that I've found is a position comes up, rather than it just going to the committee that's going to deal with that, the position gets drafted, a summary of the facts get put out there to a private members-only committee where the community, where the members can discuss and collaborate and, even brainstorm, contrarian views to different elements of the position. And eventually, after a given amount of time, the time for comments is cut off, and that's when the legislative committee takes all of the content, all of the discussions and collaborations that have been going on from the members at large, and takes all of that into account while putting together their position statement. And it does a number of things. One, it provides greater transparency, but it also, there's a certain degree of due diligence that's now taking place where the organization has involved the broader membership, and it's not kind of, sometimes organizations are accused of blindsiding the members by supporting a particular position that they may not fully understand. And it helps mitigate those risks, and also anybody that has discussed the issue before the position statement is drafted is much more likely to have buy-in and support the resorting position by the organization.
One of the very key things that you said too, I think, Andy, was no, you're good. I think that it's one of the things that you said that was very important is that when you're thinking about advocacy and creating a community around that or a legislative action center of this type, it's definitely going to have transparency to it. And so as an organization, making sure that aligns with your mission statement and your goals. And that can also be some of the criteria that you consider when you're looking at what bills is it that you're going to track, what issues is it that you're going to present to the community or that you want the community to interact around. How does that impact your core mission and primary stakeholders, your audience, and some other criteria to consider. Are there other organizations that you might want to be having a part of this community that this is also close to? When you're also looking at creating your community, it really is about keeping your personal politics out of it and making sure that the community is aligned around their business goals, their community goals, and so forth. And I think that the other thing that's really important to consider as we start diving into it is what are some of the key success metrics for the community engagement as well as the grassroots advocacy results. And we'll have resources for everyone that they can look at those after. First step that most people take with advocacy is how are they going to research, track, and monitor that. So even pre-committee or pre-community type of thing is what legislation is out there, how do you determine what your position on it, and that's what Andy was just discussing is this is a place where you can use a community to be able to determine what your position should be on that, let them interact with each other, who is in an opposition and why, who is an ally and why, and who's affected about these things and why. So really asking the community and listening to the community is all going to happen in a very early stage of when you're just starting to look at those particular bills. Resources. When you're looking at creating your advocacy strategy and when you're looking at creating your community, and this ties in a lot with what Higher Logic talks about when you're building out your community blueprint of what resources do you have to get this off the ground, both in people, and you'll notice I put in big capital letters in bold content, technology and financial. And so people, who do you have internally, volunteers, other organizations, which segments of your members is this going to be most important to, and then content. This is kind of the bear of all things for everything, which is another reason why these community ideas are so great, is that it's a lot of user-generated content, from videos to blog posts to various reports and documents that you can share, taking a sort of assessment of what content it is that you have, what content is it that you hope to have created, and then, of course, the technology, what is going to support all of that. Financial is looking at if you're doing fundraising, if you have a PAC, or other ways that you're going to support this. Andy, did I leave any resources out?
No, I think that's. I think you hit them all on the head.
Okay. When you're building your strategy is also understanding your messaging, understanding also as well that these are kind of the questions that you want to be able to ask within your community, both qualitatively and quantitatively. So when we talk about the metrics and engagements and what are the things that people are engaging on and commenting on and logging into the community, that sort of number of things that are happening, but then also what are the things that are happening, who is doing them, why, when, where, and how. All of these are good questions for you to develop your messaging and also for you to develop questions and ways to engage your community. Communication plan. And so when you're developing your community, when you're developing your advocacy strategy and having your community be a part of that, how are you going to use that community? How are you going to communicate? How are people going to communicate with themselves? But also internally, how are you going to communicate internally about particular issues? If advocacy is a very big part of what you do, you probably have some type of internal meeting process where you have your talking points, you let people know if questions are going to come in. All of this is also important when you're creating an online community for your managers to know how they're going to moderate, how they're going to be able to go in and interact and engage, what the key talking points are, and so forth, as well as externally in your campaigns and internally within your community. Well, one last thing too, with your communication plan, be using an alert system. That's really helping in making sure that your legislative tracking is letting you know when things are happening, because the community is all about educating each other, connecting each other, and getting ready for usually a particular event. Either a bill is coming up for a vote, or there's a rally that's going to be happening. within your legislative tracking system, it should be able to alert you to when those key things are going to happen. It's one of the things that I hear from a lot of grassroots lobbyists, that these things can happen very, very quickly, and we have to be ready to jump when it's time to jump, because it can happen within 2 weeks. It could take months. It could drag out. It could go to committee. But we need people to be engaged in that whole time so that when it is time for them to take action, it's easy for them to do. They know what it is, and everybody's ready to go. So implementing the strategy, aligning the technology and the people together. So perhaps you can share with us, too, some of the inventive ways that people have been able to get people that are in their organization to become a part of their community.
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of viral techniques that you can do. Many people are doing it today, especially when you use the public forums such as, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and whatnot. And I think, those sort of areas have been covered by, many other webinars in the past, so I won't go too much into them. But I think the area that's probably most interesting is just in terms of having a community strategy around your advocacy issues. This is something that we do a lot with organizations. And so, for example, anybody that, and this is where it ties in a lot with inbound marketing. If you have a webinar that discusses a hot topic, well, anybody that signs up for that hot topic or has an interest in that particular tag or campaign is a prospect in terms of getting them more involved in the legislative issues and having them take action. So I think that one of the big areas is tying engagement activity into the Legislative Action Center, and have all of that data come back as engagement data that you can then mine to figure out, well, this person attended this event, they looked at they were on this webinar, they maybe they attended the On the Hill event a couple of years ago, or maybe they purchased this book. But whatever these engagement activities are, together you realize that this is somebody that you could go after and try and get them engaged. So that's one way of doing it, and it's much more of a kind of a ground-up approach where you're reaching out and you're trying to get people to sign up. Frankly, though, the easier approach, but it's a little more controversial, is the opt-in approach, the opt-out approach, which is where you take a segment of your membership that are more active than the others. Some organizations do it with their entire membership and just give them an opt-out, a one-click, no login required, very simple opt-out. But the idea is if you've got, 10,000 members, or even if it's just 1,000 members, keeping in mind that the individuals that work for the member companies, if that might be the case, you opt them all into a campaign focused around particular issues, and then you let them opt out as and when you wish. And so the opt-out strategy is by far the most successful, because most people, generally we see at most about a 7% opt-out rate. And the open rates, as Carol already mentioned, are much higher than traditional emails. So, and of course, the success of this is different with trades versus professional societies. Trades are much more advocacy-driven, and they tend to get better results. But even the professional societies and associations, the individual associations, they tend to do pretty well as well when comparing with regular emails. So there's a whole bunch of techniques we have, and I'll just give you one other simple example. Anybody that performs a very specific action, and a common one that we like to encourage is a new member joins the organization. It could be a company or an individual, but the moment an individual that's attached to a member company, or just the individual themselves, is put in your CRM or your AMS, that person's join date is today, then part of your onboarding process should be to opt them into the various areas, explain what it is, explain what the expectations are and how it operates, and then give them an opt-out, but do it as part of their onboarding process. So they realize that, look, they've just paid good money to be a member of the organization, and you want to give them the maximum possible benefits. And generally, it's much more acceptable to do it at that point. For those that have never done this and they are very worried that members might push back on this, and of course every organization is, because everybody's concerned about over-emailing members. Another way of doing it is via your renewal. So when a member goes to renew, you prompt them to, hey, we want to opt you into our advocacy center so we keep you appraised of all of the advocacy issues. And perhaps you can specify, look, it's one email a week. Initially, it's a digest of everything going on once a week that was sent to you. But if you want it daily or on a real-time basis, you have the option to do that. But, once a day or once a week is what you could set the default to.
I would even be a little bit of a maverick about it and take it one step further and say that you're creating this community for them, and it's an additional benefit. It's part of the benefit of joining your organization. And so, yes, it's an opt-in, but it almost becomes a selling point once it starts being built and used, that people really do want to connect over these issues, but they also want someplace that's private and secure with people who think like them to do that. And this is giving them an exact place that they can do all of those things.
Exactly. But the other thing to think about is that obviously every organization is different, and an organization that has a huge amount of advocacy may have a much more complicated action center, legislative action center. And so in their case, they may break it up into federal, state, or other, sub-issues. And so, to try and sign somebody up for real time for every single element of content that's being generated will be too much. But on the other hand, many organizations are smaller and they don't have that many issues that they're advocating at one time. And so, a weekly or a daily email might be more than enough to give them everything going on, and they don't have to worry about missing certain bits here or there.
Right. And we just happen to land on email as well to talk about email and making sure that we have segmented, that we follow some email best practices, and also best practices with content, keeping blogs educational, providing third-party data, using visual infographics. Short and personal videos always have a great impact, especially when you're trying to educate someone about the impact this may have on them. And reports that are more visual. They don't bore or overwhelm people, and you can use the community to discuss what's going on in the particular report, and then obviously using the style that's going to match your audience. One last thing on events, and then we're going to jump over to actually showing you a live example of what this would look like. There's actually a post that I wrote on Votability's blog, I think a year or so ago, where Glenn Beck was doing this grassroots sort of movement against the Common Core and why the Common Core is bad. And he put together this whole documentary. He put together this entire PR campaign online and through traditional means of driving people to the movie theaters. People actually went to the movie theaters and paid like $12 a person to go in to see this documentary about the Common Core and how it's ruining our educational system. And I was listening to the NPR story about it, and at the end of the story, the reporter had shared some of the insights of people that had actually been there. And the one thing that they kept saying was, we're excited to do something, but we don't know what to do. We don't know where to go. There was no next step for us to take. Should we kind of form together and sort of create our own little group of it? They didn't really have a place to go or an action to take. And so if you're going to do that kind of work into an event, let the ripple effect continue on. Give them a place to go online. Talk about it during the event so that they can say everything that's happening here can be spread outside of those four walls into other people, and start really integrating the community in real life as well as online. And I was just amazed that seemed to be such a huge missing link there, which is why I think this is so important. So I'm going to actually flip out of presentation mode, and we're going to go into our demo. And Andy, can you see our site up here?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, great. And so also, if you have any questions as we're going along, please feel free to put those into the chat pane. But this is just an example of what a legislative action center might look like. And this was actually modeled after some of our other customers who have created sort of their version of a legislative action center. And you can see, too, right here on the home page is that whatever people have subscribed to within your community, the news that they want to hear is what's going to show up here. But you can inspire people to take action. This, for example, inspires parents that are coming in to go and to share their story, where they can go and they can post something that they can then have a public link for, and then that post then can be used We had one organization where they had a bill that went through, and it really impacted their members in a negative way. And despite all of their advocacy efforts, they weren't able to convince Congress to not pass this particular bill. And so they went up and they actually collected stories from people and then used those stories regionally to then be able to make an impact to legislators to reopen the bill. This is something that they had to do that manually. They could have done that all right here and then had it continue to grow from there. So you can see that you can share latest discussions where members can actually talk about various issues between themselves. So it looks like it asked me to log in. And you can see the comments that they make. They can reply to it. They can support it. It gives them a place where they can learn more from each other as well as from all of the materials that you've provided. And you can also see here, too, you can, if they've come here, they've educated, that they can take action right away. And that's all of these comments that you see here, too, are just for demo purposes. This isn't an actual site. And you can also see, too, that we have posted various things in various communities so that if someone wants to be tracking on a federal level what's happening in education, but they live in California, they can have both of those things, that information at their fingertips anytime they want to go in and ask more. So we'll just show you a quick example of what that might look like. So here is an example of, say, this organization had a federal issue and that they followed education relatively closely. They encouraged their members to join this community because we want to understand where your stance is. Here's all of our education materials. Discuss it with each other. Find out where the latest events are. Organize your volunteers in this way. And so you have, just as you had before, you have what are your latest discussions, what are the latest alerts. People can discuss this particular issue on this particular thing on various threads and topics. They can go to the what I call the content library, where you'll probably have lots of reports and videos and website links, all supporting information that you want to make available to the community, and they can be posted here so that they can access that at any time. They can sort through the various things that they may want to see. And this is one of the features that actually is my favorite. This is where your members can actually create blog posts or articles that share their personal stories, as I mentioned before. And that members can support these, they can comment on these, they can create a link that's a public link that they can then go and share that on social media or on Facebook or something along those lines. There's a calendar of events, so if you have a rally that's coming up, or if you want to create an event for your annual conference where you talk about this particular topic, that can be shown to those people who really, these are the people who are going to see it who care about these things the most. This is my, I think, probably second favorite part of this is that grassroots advocacy is really about not just the individual connections to the organization, but it's also the connection that they have with each other. And so being able to mobilize them, connect them to one to another. Here is a place where I can connect with various people, say that I'm working on an event with, or that we're in the same particular state, and I want to be able to have connections to all of my local people within the community. I can send them messages privately back and forth one to another. And so that's a great thing. And then lastly, of course, and this depends on whether you're an organization that is compelling your people, your audience, to be able to take an advocacy action. They can take an action right here within the community to email their legislator. This is just a sample campaign that we've run, and you can put in here whether you have a position for this bill. So say, for example, you are just watching it and you don't necessarily have a position yet. You don't have to show that, but you can say we're for or against and this is why. You can give them more information to read the entire bill themselves. But even better, that you can summarize here what's going on with this bill, what is it that you need them to do, and then they can fill out this simple form and they can then take that action. And then this piece of email will then go to their legislator. It saves the information so that they match their legislator directly with the person that needs to get this particular email. They don't have to leave the system in order to do that. They can do it right here. So this is, in a word, a place where you can take all of your community members and you can put them into a place where they can decide what is it that's most interesting to them, what is it that they're going to engage on, and you can measure from the beginning of how you got them there, how they interact in the community, on what, even all the way to what are the people who are your most active advocates as far as sending emails, calls, written letters to various legislators. Andy, anything that you think I missed?
Sorry, I had it on mute. No, just the only other thing is remember that also every individual has a profile as well, and you can use a profile as a way for capturing information about who is interested in what. You know, like, for example, I might be interested in federal issues, but only ones related to education or energy or something like that. And so you can add these, what we call custom demographics, as many as you want to their profile, have them fill them out as part of their onboarding process. And that way, if ever you do try and get them to opt in or you opt them in proactively, then you know which ones they're most likely going to match and most likely going to be interested in. The other elements which we didn't cover is gamification. And, you know, in most professional organizations, they don't really use the term gamification, but, you know, think of digital recognition and badging and, you know, giving some sort of status, albeit in a digital environment, where you recognize and reward people for their contributions and for going that extra step and helping you advocate accordingly. All of that works because all of the data can go back into the AMS or back into the engagement center, and then, of course, you can trigger based on that.
Absolutely. And as someone who comes from the customer experience, member experience, inbound sales, marketing background, I think the thing that's really great about this is you can customize it, as Andy just said, to find out information about what it is that they're going to be most interested in and segment accordingly. You have one place where you can educate people, you can communicate with people, you can mobilize them all in one particular platform, and that's why I'm really excited to what we're doing with Higher Logic. It brings the best of engagement together. All right, I'm going to see if we have any other questions from anyone before we sign off. Anything you want to close us out with, Andy?
No, other than first of all, if anybody does have a question, use the little chat icon at the top of the screen, and just type it in there. Also, obviously, Carol and I can be contacted via email afterwards. But generally, the thing to consider is often it would be great for your members to be able to collaborate and discuss these hot topics. This is not something they can typically do in the public forums. In some cases, their companies do not allow them to take a position, but still they want to be part of the conversation. By providing a lockdown, closed environment that's going to encourage member participation, then you're able to do this in a safe way where they can be confident that their views are protected. So, and of course, a community can be around all advocacy for a particular industry, or it can be around very specific issues, or, as broad as all federal issues or all state issues or specific state issues and so on.
Perfect. So I don't see any questions coming through yet, and so what I'm going to do is we do have some follow-up materials for everyone, and so if you want to check those out, let me just get back there. Fast forwarding. All right, so we have two actual books that we're going to be sharing with everyone. So we have a member engagement ebook from Votility, and then from Higher Logic, they have a community grassroots blueprint that we're going to be sharing, and then I'm going to throw in a bonus one. We also have an advocacy strategy checklist that we're going to be sharing with everyone. And we'll also be sharing a link that if you want a more extensive personalized demonstration of this or how some of these concepts might apply to your organization, we'll also provide you a link where you can request a personal one-to-one with us. All right, so I'm going to close off. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you sharing your community insights with us, and until next time.
Thank you. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.